Good morning and welcome to Daylight Church Online. We're just so thankful that you're joining us this morning and hope that you have a great experience. We want to let you know that if you'll go to mydaylightchurch.com, there's a card there that says Online Church. And on the Online Church card, it'll tell you everything you need to know about being a part of our online church community, how you can get involved in small groups, how you can give financially, how you can be involved in the service projects that we do. So even if you're in Kansas or Cambodia, you can sure join us and be a part of our church. We'd like you to check it out there and introduce yourself. So go to mydaylightchurch.com and check out the online church card. Thanks. So we're on a series where we talk about the stuff we do, and we've covered things like our service projects, and we've covered things like nightlight services and our feeding ministry downtown, and we're kind of preaching through our announcements. And what we're talking about this week is the fact that we gather. We're talking about this Sunday morning service and other moments where we come together and kind of why we do that, the importance of it, and encouragement to be involved when those opportunities come. And those of you that have been around for a while know that I often will try to find a video that connects with the sermon in some sense, in some way. And man, I searched and searched for a video this week, and I just couldn't come up with anything. And I was really kind of disgruntled and dissatisfied at the end because on YouTube, this is the kind of stuff that comes up, is 8 reasons God wants you to go to church. And there's so many videos like this. And most of them, in my opinion, watching way too many of them to try to find the right one, have this vibe of, if you want to be right with God, you've got to be right with the church. Now come to the church so you can get right with God. And that was kind of the message of many of the churches. Some of them addressed the question. One of the videos was called, "Is skipping church a sin?" And I have so many, I just want to break that down and even talk about what it means to be a sin, because I think a sin is a bad thought that we get in our heads, like God is making a checklist of all your sins, and he's keeping a list and checking it twice, and he's going to find out if you're naughty or nice. And there's just the mentality of you got to come to church to fix yourself, to do good. It's like badness prevention to come to church. And I just feel like this message, if you want to be good with God, you ought to be good with church, just feels off to me. And I discovered something important about the concept of church from my friend Bella, and I want to talk about Bella for just a moment. And I still continue to pray that this will be a sacred moment. Bella came to Daylight Church 5 or 6 years ago and presented as Tony. And when I met Tony, I met Tony as they walked in, and then I sat in the seats next to him and said, what's your name? Got to know him a little bit. And my vibe was that Tony was a feminine dude. But it turns out that Tony was a trans woman that presents as Bella most of the time. But for the sake of experiencing church for the first time, or a church for the first time, wanted to present as male. And there's long conversations around why they made those choices. But I got an email shortly after meeting Tony as Bella. It was a Facebook message, actually. No, it was an email. Facebook came later. And Bella's email to me started with this line: "I'm the most hated person in America. I'm a fat, liberal, black, trans." And she said, "But I loved your church, and I'd love to come if you'll have me." And the answer, of course, was, "Please, please come. We would love to have you. Don't be scared." And Bella and I became good friends. Over the years, we ate a lot of meals together. We participated in a chili cook-off together. I would pick her up. She had kidney dialysis pretty often, so I would pick her up at the hospital, and we'd go to lunch. And it was really common that Bella was about the most encouraging person I ever met in my life. I went back this week, and you'll start to get a vibe. Bella passed away a couple years ago, and so when I refer to her in the past tense, that's why. But I got on her Facebook page and started scrolling through every time my name popped up. And I'm literally doing this, because in public, she would post comments like this: "Got to see one of my fave people and spiritual advisor, Mr. H.L. Hussman. What a great human being I'm blessed to know. Thank you for everything, and your gorgeous wife. You are the best." And it was multiple times a year that Bella would post something like this on her Facebook page. It wasn't a private message. She would tag me on something and say, and she always referred to me as her good friend and spiritual advisor. And I really don't remember ever giving her spiritual advice, so that was kind of funny to me. But there was some kind of maybe from the pulpit, I guess, but our conversation is centered around good food and sexual ethics and what it means to be trans and what it means to be black in America and politics. And I don't talk politics with very many people at all, but I talk politics with Bella. And we just developed this deep and meaningful friendship. And Bella invited me to a drag show at Play, the gay club downtown. And it was a fundraiser for an organization that combats ableism. And if you don't know what ableism is discrimination that's based on like physical ability. And so it highlights the fact that disabled people are often looked down upon in society, and it tries to combat that and bring awareness to it. And it was a fundraising drag show for that. And I'm this white, cis, pseudo, neo-evangelical, straight dude getting invited to a drag show for the first time. And I'm nervous about it, honestly. And so I'm calling my friends that I know have been to drag shows. I'm like, what can I expect? And I'm particularly interested in like the concept of applause. Like when do I clap? And I'm also interested in how much am I going to be expected to tip? Are they going to try to dance in my lap and expect me to shove $1 bill? This is where I was at on that day, okay? I'm wondering what it's going to be like. And they're like, no, it'll be cool. You'll be welcome. It'll be warm. You'll be safe. You'll be with Bella. Bella will keep you safe. Trust them. And so I went to this drag show. And I found out real quick that my friends that had experienced drag shows were absolutely right. Bella brought me in, introduced me to all her friends, like this public announcements. This is H.L. Hussman, my pastor and spiritual advisor and one of my best friends in the world. And they were hugging me and loving me, and they didn't know a thing about me, but they made me feel very, very welcome. And I remember the show. There were multiple times, and I'm just trying to be as transparent as I can right now. There were multiple times during the show that I felt like I ought to avert my eyes. There was like this blatant animalistic sexuality to it that made me uncomfortable in some sense. And that's a separate conversation for another day because that's not the topic for the day. But for the most part, I was kind of shocked at how communal the whole thing was. How people and honestly how conservative a lot of it was. Like the dress of the people in the drag show, how like what they were wearing. It wasn't BDSM stuff. It was more conservative stuff. And the dancing was even more conservative than I expected. And I remember at one moment, a girl was wheeled out in a wheelchair, and it was probably cerebral palsy is my guess, but she had an arm that was tucked away, and her head tilted kind of to the side, and the music started, and somebody came up and pulled a blanket off of her, and this was her stripping. This was her version of stripping. Was somebody pulled a blanket off of her, and she was wearing this conservative negligee, and she couldn't really dance, but she would do like this. And the crowd went nuts for this girl with cerebral palsy dancing in a wheelchair, stripping. And probably the most radiant and memorable smile I've ever seen in my life was on this girl's face. I can see it to this day. There was something about my people love me that was going on. And I think back to that moment and the weirdness of the moment for me, because like if my daughter Elena came to me and said, I'm thinking about stripping at a drag show, I would probably try to talk her out. I would most definitely try to talk her out of it. Like I would say there's something off about the lasciviousness of that moment. If you're unfamiliar with that word, Google it. It's a great word. You ought to know it. But there was also something about body positivity going on at that moment. There was something about community and fellowship and people embracing one another and caring for one another. And I remember having this thought that I wanted to put on the screen. They do church better than most churches do church. And I remember thinking, because before we started Daylight Church, I church hopped for a while because we went from church to church to find out how do you do stuff. We didn't know how to take up an offering or how to serve communion or anything like that. We were trying to figure it out. And so we went to all these churches trying to figure out what we wanted to embrace, what we wanted to make sure we never did, what we felt good about, what we felt bad about, the music, the offering, the whole shebang. And I remember thinking, I never felt as welcomed at any of those churches as I did at Play, the gay club downtown. This white, cis, hetero dude walking into a gay bar felt more welcome and more embraced than he had in any of the churches he had visited. And there's something really off about that. And I still have a hard time figuring out that whole thing. And this isn't a conversation about transgenderism or pronoun use, or like if you're freaking out because I used she for Bella, then let's do lunch. Let's talk, because I love talking about this stuff. And it's not about who should use what bathroom or anything of the sort. That's not the point. It's about community. And it's about what it means to be a community that loves one another. And when Bella died, I don't know the details, which makes me suspect something obviously something tragic happened. She was young. I don't know what went down. But I look back to her last message to me, and it was this: as the new year approaches, I'm so very grateful for your kind, sweet spirit. So she didn't know me very well, apparently. Your kind, sweet spirit, love, and friendship. Also, let's get a January date on the books. So this was really common that we would communicate this way. We'd get a date on the books, and we'd go to lunch. And we did that date in January. And if I remember right, she passed away in February. And was just gone. And I posted a tribute on my Facebook page about Bella, kind of telling this story and breaking it down a little bit. And lots and lots of likes and comments. And I'm still to this day a little frustrated and irritated by a little bit of the tone of some of the comments. And I want to be careful here, because I think people had the best of intentions. But there were comments that smelt of, I'm so glad you were there to help fix her. They're just barely there. People were pretty careful, but it was stuff like, what a great witness you were. You're the best. You did good, right? Why not Bella did good? I mean, she had no reason to invite me into her space. She had no reason to trust a white, hetero, cis dude. But she crossed that line before anyone else did. She was the bravest of the bunch. And there was something very special about my friend, and I miss her deeply. So I want to address this concept: if you want to be good with God, you ought to be good with the church. There's this idea that we're going to do our thing here, and if you want to come get fixed, this is the spot to do it. And I just feel like it's an unhealthy way of looking at church, and it stems from an unhealthy view of God and what God is like, how God approaches us, how God treats us, how God thinks about us. And if you think about church this way, you're going to think about most everything this way. There's going to be this blanket of shame that covers the entirety of your life as you aspire to be good enough. And I just don't think that's what church was meant to be. And I think you can look at the history of church and see the early history of the church was different than that. But I feel like we ought to replace this statement of you want to be good with God, you ought to be good with the church, to something like there's a beautiful place for you centered around faith in God. You see, when I went to play, there was a commonality that community had. You see the word community? It has common baked into it. There was something in common, and it had to do with sexuality and gender, the LGBTQI plus organization, conversation. That was their rallying point. That was what brought them together. And so when you talk about a community, you have to ask the question of what is in common? What is the commonality? What is the thing we're trying to center around? And it's faith in God, and in my opinion, it's Jesus. We want Jesus to be the center. And that, in my opinion, is, if you look at it deeply enough, feels different than come get fixed with God. There's something deeper and more beautiful and more awesome and awe-inspiring than that. And so I have to wonder, where is that church? And can we be that church? And are we that church? And why aren't there more churches like that, where it's a beautiful space where people can come and have the commonality of faith in Jesus, and kind of let that be the standard where people from different sides of the aisle can connect and focus on that. That's what I want Daylight Church to be. When you read the scriptures, you see this concept of brotherhood, and it's a patriarchally, how do I want to describe this? It was a book written during a very patriarchal moment in history, and so you hear brotherhood a whole lot, and you don't hear a lot about sisterhood, but I think it's easy to transfer it over to brotherhood and sisterhood, or siblinghood, if you will. But it says, I appeal to you, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice. This is a passage that we've read recently, and it's the one we talked about where every person has their own skill sets and abilities, and they need to use those things to do something good for others. It says if your skill is showing mercy, then show mercy. If it's teaching, then teach well, and so forth. And it goes on to say, and it concludes, so it says this, it says, offer your bodies as a living sacrifices unto God, brothers. Then it says, whatever you're capable of doing, do it for the community. And then it moves on to this. It says, love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. We go back to Romans 12, the very beginning of it. It's, I appeal to you, therefore, adelphoi, by the mercies of God. And adelphoi is brothers, brotherhood. It's a word you'll see really often. Love one another with Philadelphia. Philadelphia in the Greek. What is Philadelphia? The city of brotherly love. It says, love one another with brotherly love. And it says, outdo one another in showing honor. One of my favorite pieces of marital advice is to have a love war, where one tries to love the other more than the other, because everything's a competition and you must win, right? But outdo one another in showing honor. Like if you're going to be competitive about something, be competitive in serving, be competitive in loving and showing honor. Honor everyone, love the brothers. This is the same word, adelphos. I love this one. Let Philadelphia abide. And I keep hearing, let the dude abide. The dude abides. I don't know why. One person has seen that movie, which has the funniest scene of any movie ever that I won't go into. It says he put all things under his feet and gave him his head over all things to the church. Notice this. It's talking about Jesus. And it says the Father put all things under Jesus' feet and gave Jesus as the head over all things and gave him to the church, which is his body, the fullness of him who fills all in all. And I'll have a prize for you at the end of the service if you can tell me what the Greek word for church is here. I have failed. Yeah, did I hear Jordan say it? Ecclesia. Ecclesia, which literally means the gathering. It says, I have given Jesus, who is everything, to the gathering. It's supposed to be a communal experience. It's supposed to be a body of people. I found this journal entry, professional journal entry from Liberty University by Tara Cottle called "The Ecclesia is an Assembly that Invokes Response." And it's a bit of a drag to go through it, but I'm going to anyway. Here we go. The significance of the term ecclesia is often understated by modern researchers and modern Christians alike. Within today's Christian church, the ecclesia is often translated as simply church. Translating to church results in the term ecclesia losing much of its significance. This watered-down translation de-emphasizes the responsibilities of the ecclesia and the call of the body of believers to contribute to the common good and be active in all areas of the world. This separation falls into a classic fallacy of modern-day believers, the belief that there are some areas of life that are sacred and some that are secular. Well, it's a weeks-long sermon series right there. This belief is not biblical if God is over all of life. And then it says, however, while the ecclesia is defined differently between Christian and secular audiences, in both contexts, the term implies community obligation and contribution to the common good. So it's not just a gathering. It's not just people coming under a roof together to sing or worship. These are all parts of the whole. It's people coming together with something in common, community, common, the common good. And it's a long article, or a long journal entry. You can check it out yourself. But it appears from Scripture and from studying the ancient language that there's more to it than just I show up to get fed. I show up to leave feeling better. I show up to give in the offering, or I, me. Church is not supposed to be that. And so when we say I go to church, what we mean is I go to be a part of a whole. I go to be a part of a gathering. Ecclesia, agape, Philadelphia, and adelphos are all very highly communal words. But this is where introverts like myself go nuts. I don't want to be communal. I'm reminded of a moment on a train, and I don't remember where it was. I think it was Budapest. But my wife and I were on a train, and people kept piling in. The doors were open, and people were coming in and coming in and coming in until they were starting to press. We're literally rubbing elbows with each other, not figuratively, literally rubbing elbows. And then we're pressed up, and then you can start to smell people's breath and their sweat, and it's just, it's getting closer and closer. And Kara's starting to freak out. Right? She's, close to hyperventilating. She's like, I can't. And I'm like, so I'm holding her arm, and I'm saying, babe, it's going to be okay. We just got to get to the next stop. It's going to be fine. And she's like, I can't. And more people start pressing, and more people start pressing. And finally, she bolts for the door and pushes people out of the way and goes outside. And the doors start to close, and then I'm trapped on this. It may have been Rome. We may have been in Rome. All I know is that we didn't have a way of contacting one another, and we were going to be sunk if we got separated, right? We'd end up having to call home, call our son, make coordinates, figure it out. So I'm pushing people out of the way and get to the door and shove the doors open and fall out. And I'm pretty steamed. I'm like, what are you doing? What are you thinking, right? But she was in this space where people were pressing, and she couldn't handle it. And I relate to that on a deep, deep existential level. Not a physical, like, space level, but I don't want you guys around me too much level. People just flat exhaust me. And I don't want to smell your sweat. And I certainly don't want to know what you had for breakfast based on your breath, right? And I mean all that figuratively. Like, it's hard to be communal. It's hard to be so deeply connected with people that you know them, that you get them, that you feel them. Because once you know them, get them, feel them, then you're going to carry weights that you didn't carry before. And that's hard. And nobody really wants that. But as it turns out, it's kind of the foundation of what life is supposed to be. Is that you're supposed to smell what somebody had for breakfast, figuratively speaking. You're supposed to know what's going on in their lives. We're supposed to carry one another's burdens and care about one another. Even Jesus freaked out in a train once. In Luke 5, it says, the report about him went abroad, and great crowds gathered to hear him and to be healed of their infirmities. But he would withdraw to desolate places and pray. And there's pretty often that he was like a crowd ninja. I don't know how he did it, but there's many times where it's the crowd pressing on him, and he escaped or moved aside or went somewhere. And there's one scene where, because once you figure out that a doctor has a pill that can heal you, it's going to draw a crowd, right? And Jesus was healing everybody, and people were coming in swarms. And at one point, he's on a boat, and the swarms are coming, and he says to his guys, let's push off and go to the other side. Like that. There's times when Jesus, just as a self-care method, I guess, or I'm sure it's connected to the voice of the Father saying, hey, I need you over here and not over here as well. But there is reason to believe that Jesus needed to get out of the train, so to speak, every now and then. And I feel that. And the church can be so, like, Stepford Wives creepy sometimes. I was listening to a podcast this week where they repeated this phrase over and over, we belong to each other. And I thought, you don't own me. Like that was my response to that is I don't want to be a part of an organization where I belong to someone. Now, I get what they're saying. There's something about belonging, and we want to come in and feel accepted. And I don't want to argue completely with the podcast, but the phrase itself just raised my hackles a little bit. Is I don't want to. You don't belong to me. I don't belong to you. We don't own one another. This is free. This is something freely given. Now, maybe we need each other, or we can help each other. Yes, but we belong to each other. And the church gets on these catchphrases and slogans that, in my opinion, have a deep-seated manipulation and a power struggle behind them in some sense. Not entirely. They're good-natured, good-intended people, but sometimes these slogans are used to control. One that drives me nuts is, I just want to love on you. There's only one person I want loving on me, and that's my wife. The rest of you can love off me. There's something really creepy about this statement to me. I don't want to be loved on. And then this one sounds like a prison sentence. Let's do life together. No, thank you. Have you guys ever heard of a murmuration of starlings? I don't know if you'll be able to see it very well from back there. This is the only free video I could find that was uncopyrighted. The others are really expensive, but starlings will get together by the thousands and form these nebulous mobs that swarm around and create interesting visuals. And like the aerial physics involved in this is, from my understanding, pretty stellar and pretty spectacular. Nobody really knows how their brains link in such a way where they know to do the right move at the right time. And I heard this week that if one gets off, it's chaos. But the podcast I was listening to was talking about this as an example for the church. Like this is how the church ought to ebb and flow. And I'll be honest with you, I don't want to be a part of this. Not at all. I don't want to be in the middle of that. That freaks me out, to think about being in that mess and having to coordinate and having to be that close to people all the time and shaping my life by it, because there's something in me that, like, I want to be cool. I want to be different. It's amazing how different we can be and still be the same a lot of times. But I have this social, emotional cynic in my head that's just buried there, and I think it's buried in. I think pain has dug something up and just buried it there that says this will never work. This just can't be. And part of it is because you think of the concept of a wingman or a wingwoman, a person next to you that was supposed to have your back and supposed to support you and supposed to be there unified with you and helping you ebb and flow and move through life. And it was my wingman, in general, that have hurt me the most in life. It's the people that ought to have had my back, the people who ought to have flown with me in unison, that stuck it in and twisted the knife the hardest. And so now I've got this inner cynic that says, well, I'm just going to keep my distance. I used to be an extreme extrovert. I'm a really extreme introvert right now. And some of it's, I'm convinced, we're going to start getting into my therapy sessions now. But the point is this: just saying unity and community is one thing. Accomplishing it is something entirely different. And it isn't easy. And even for those going through like a theological or a spiritual deconstruction, a lot of times I was reading another podcast this week, or listening to another podcast this week, about how the end result of many people's deconstruction is kind of a reverse fundamentalism, where now the entire world is viewed through skepticism. And the entire world is viewed through, it even mentioned rage against the machine or whatever. Deconstruct. So there's ways to fall off the horse in either direction. And somehow, like, healthy community is part of the centerpiece of building a healthy, thriving life. But then the one clear question is, can't I do this thing alone? So we talk about the 4 pillars at Daylight Church: service, study, worship, and rest. And can I serve by myself? Well, sort of. Can I study by myself? Yeah, kind of. Can I worship by myself? Yeah. Can I rest by myself? Yes. But really, there's community baked into each one of these, because if you're going to serve, who are you going to serve by yourself? It's actually impossible to serve alone. And then we discovered last week, the more people that show up for our food ministry, the more elaborate the menu we can do, because we got an assembly line who created this amazing food, and it was person after person after person. You serve better together. And that just sounded like a church slogan that I just want to, it kind of grossed myself out for just a second there. Yeah, just. But you need community to serve well. To study well, who are you going to study if you're going to study alone? I mean, you can go for a walk and study the trees and the birds, but if you really want to get deep on anything, you're going to rely on what other people have brought before you. You're going to rely on a community of sorts. And then really even the higher education, the academic process requires having your works examined. Like you need people to challenge you. To study well, you have to have people to challenge you. And so it's a communal process. To worship, yes, you can worship alone, but who are you worshiping? You're worshiping God, and who does God love? There you go. If you're going to worship God well, you're going to have to love well. And to love well, you're going to have to be in community. And rest is always the weirdo of the pillars. But rest is kind of like the Sabbath. The Sabbath, what does the Sabbath mean without work? Like it's a non-thing until work enters the picture. So when the Sabbath was initiated, it was 6 days of work followed by 1 day of rest. And in some sense, this idea of withdrawal or isolation or solitude what do those words even mean without some kind of community? Like they become non-things. Isolation, solitude are areas that you go to separate from the community. It's like Aristotle's golden mean is how much involvement is too much involvement, because you'd have too much involvement on one side, and that's probably unhealthy, and you can have no involvement on the other side, which is kind of unhealthy. There's some place in between that's a sweet spot, and that sweet spot is community that honors your freedom to step away from community. You can't serve, study, worship, and rest without some kind of communal action. So where do you go from here? How do you do it? Well, it starts with prayer. You know what, Mayor? I totally skipped you. Come read for me. Let's do it right now, will you? Yeah, please. We got a mic? No, I was going to bring up the passage. Let's see. Where's the handheld? Talk loud near my chest. We're communal. Here you go.
And John 16:33, these things I've spoken to you, for that in me you may have peace. In the world you have tribulation, but take courage. I have overcome the world. Then 7:1, these things Jesus spoke, and lifting up his eyes to heaven, he said, Father, the hour has come. Glorify thy Son, that the Son may glorify thee. And then over to 17, sanctify them in the truth. Thy word is truth. As thou didst send me into the world, I also have sent them into the world. And for their sakes I sanctify myself, that they themselves also may be sanctified in truth. I do not ask in behalf of these alone, but for those also who believe in me through their word, that they may all be one, even as thou, Father, art in me, and I in thee, that they may also be in us, that the world may believe that thou didst send me. And the glory which thou hast given me, I have given to them, that they may be one, just as we are one. I in them, and thou in me, that they may be perfected in unity, and the world may know that thou didst send me, and didst love them, even as thou didst love me.
So it's that prayer that Jesus prayed over his disciples, is that they would be one as we are one, that we believe in a Trinitarian view of God, God the Father, the Son, and Holy Spirit, that God perpetually and eternally has existed in relationship and community. And Jesus was praying for his people that would be their experience, that they would exist communally. And it says, so that the world will know that you have sent me. So start by that. I don't want to be in the murmuration. I don't want to be pressed in. I don't want to rub elbows with anybody. I certainly don't want to smell anybody's breakfast. But it feels like there's something that needs to happen here. We've got to get past some of that stuff. Still have the freedom to step away, but the freedom to step in without fear as well. And that starts with a prayer, is God, please help us to be one. Help me to experience community the way you want me to experience it. Help me to be a part of the community that you want me to be a part of. So start with a prayer. Continue with pragmatism, which I'm gonna fly through this. Ultimately, you need to lower your expectation of church. Shocking statement, maybe. Something to chew on. And lower your expectation of people and the joy they're going to bring you. In some sense, pragmatics say we're all broken, the church is broken. There's something hard about stepping into the train or the elevator or wherever the people are pressing. And just be okay with that reality. Because as long as you're not okay with that, you're never going to step in. And all this is figurative, of course. I'm not asking you we're not going to pile into the hallway after this. That would be really, really weird. Flannery O'Connor said this. She said, most of us come to the church by a means the church does not allow, which means you've got to rub elbows with people that aren't doing it the way you think they ought to do it. And I pray that we'll be a center and a place for people to do that. Wynne Collier says this. He says, grace is immense. The presence of Christ invades the world. I believe, and this is not a salvific statement or a soteriological statement. I believe God was working in Bella's life. Now, Bella and I did not see eye to eye on a lot of things. There's a lot of things that we did see eye to eye on. But just like me and John probably wouldn't see eye to eye on a lot of things, and there's a lot of things that we do see eye to eye on. Me and Dee. I mean, that's the reality of the church. And if you're expecting to find a place where you're going to come in and everybody's going to, now you're getting back into the Stepford Wives. We belong to one another. Let's love on one another. That's just not how it was ever intended to be. Let it be a place where people do butt heads sometimes. And approach it with purpose. For me, the skepticism is pain-based. And at some point, you've got to have love with abandon despite pain, which is called the cross. At some point, you've got to say, I'm going to love anyway. Even if the starling next to me betrays me, stabs me in the back, I'm never going to give up on love. I'm never going to give up on that. So you got to have the purpose of, I'm going into this thing because love is the ideal. Love is all in all. God is love. And it's the proving grounds of love. It's the crucible of faith, is interaction with other folks. The proving grounds of love, the crucible of faith, is found in a train where you're bumped up against people and you're just thinking, I got to get out of here. I can't take this anymore. That's the place where love shows up. What does love even mean without such a thing? And then finally, it's just posturing yourself. It's putting yourself in the spot. Wayne Collier said this. He said, I understand the desire and even need to walk away from a church because the wounds are too deep and I don't have a safe place to go. But if that morphs into a sense that I can create this on my own, disconnected from the body of Christ and the people of God across time and history, and the story that has been nurtured and that martyrs have died for, that I can create a community that is like a cocoon that is to my liking, I think we've created another mess. So there's this sweet spot between solitude and isolation, and I can do this alone because it's me and God, and he's my wingman, he's my ride or die, everything's cool, and people help people. There's this beautiful space where you can come and be involved with people and be loved be loved regardless of. And that's the space we want to create here, and this is a space I invite you to enter into. I'll close with this. In Galatians 6, it says, carry each other's burdens. And in this way, listen to this. We want to talk about badness prevention. If we really want to go back to what is sin, is it a sin to skip church, or is it a sin to do this? Even if that is your mentality, here, this says it all. It says, you will fulfill the law of Christ by carrying others' burdens. And what is required to carry others' burdens? Presence, posture, being there, mixing it up, smelling what they had for breakfast, feeling their sweat against your arm, connecting.